when it comes to serving in the corporate sector. He has led from the front, for over 2 decades, mainly in leading schools and colleges across the country. He has primarily been instrumental in initiating positive changes when it comes to leaders who are in the academic spaces. I would say the topic for today's discussion is indeed unique, and I would also say it's something urgent and important need in today's challenging situation. Note for today's discussion, without wasting any time, I would probably start off with this context. As I understand, leadership should be a combination of both transactional as well as transformational kinds. Very curious to know from Major General Bali as to how you would interpret a good leader as.
The voice is not clear.
Is it, sir? Am I more audible right now? Yes. So what I would be interested in understanding is primarily a good leader. Is he more of a transactional leader, which involves giving something in return of a favor? More of a transformational kind, wherein you set the vision and mission of a particular, I would say, an objective inside the hearts of the individuals and ask them to lead it. Is a good leader somebody who backs everybody, necessarily lead from the front, but he is behind everyone, giving them the right direction and also ensuring the safety and security of all the people who are following his guidelines. So with this, I'm looking forward for a great session. I can see that more than 63 participants have involved themselves right now, and I'm sure there are many more who would be joining us. I would request Major General Bali to open the session. Also, at this point, I would like to welcome the principals of all the institutions under the PS group of institutions. Very warm welcome to Dr. Chaitanya Kumar, who is principal of PS Institute of Technology and Management. He is a leader with an illustrious experience, a principal for more than 3 to 4 decades. He has led from the front, our institution for the last couple of years. I also welcome the principal of our public school, Dr. Somashekar. I welcome the principal of PES Polytechnic, Dr. Gautam. I welcome the principal of PES Institute of Advanced Management Studies, Dr. Sailatha. And also, I would extend a warm welcome to the heads of various departments of engineering. I also understand that the principal of the PES Pre-University, Dr. Rangnathaya, has also joined us. So as I was sharing with Major General Bali, close to about all the 4 principals from the PES group of institutions, accompanied by their faculty, are participating in today's seminar to understand what would be the changing phase of leadership under the challenging conditions we are facing at the moment. So over to you, Major General Bali. Thank you for giving us this privilege.
Let me start with a couple of administrative points so that we can enjoy this the best. I'll request everyone to please switch off your mics because If there is noise, then others can't listen to it carefully. If your bandwidth is low, you can even switch off your cameras for the time being. And at any point you have a question, you can put it in the chat box, or at the end, I'll give you ample opportunity to ask as many things as you want to know from the talk. I must begin by thanking Mr. Pramod Prabhudev, who's been very kind to provide me with the opportunity to interact with all of you, to all the principals, all the faculty. And I am going to talk about something which should be a pressing issue with everybody.
ಯಾವುದು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ವಿಡಿಯೋನಾ?
May I request Mr. Shashi Kumar to switch off your mic?
Hello. Tick.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, in case there is a break in network anywhere in between, no one should panic. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I have a backup. So I'm going to talk about the future of leadership, which should be a pressing issue with everyone. But after I stepped out of the armed forces, after serving for 41 years, I realized that it is not often on everyone's mind, because not everyone thinks he or she is a leader. We're going to talk about that, and we are going to talk about some useful lessons from the Army on this subject. The first question that I would request the faculty to think about is, who do you think you lead? Is it even important for you to think about leading? Is it not enough that you are wonderful teachers, professors, faculty? Is leadership reserved for politicians and people working in the armed forces? The obvious answer is no. Everybody needs to understand the art and science of leadership. Even when you become a basketball team captain in school, you have to exhibit leadership. Whether you're in charge of a club, well, of course, as a principal, you are in any case a leader, but even as a professor, you have to display leadership to your students. You're not a leader in the conventional sense of the word, but you have to exhibit leadership. Each one of us who's a parent has to display leadership at home, but often we don't look at it like that. So therefore, this is not a subject which is exclusive to, say, the Army or the armed forces, much as the Army knows a few secrets, out of which I'm going to share a couple of them with you today. Then you should think three things, which we will talk about today. All this business of change that we talk about, how does it really impact our future? You might think this is a very simple question, but as you will see in a moment, not all change is same. The change that COVID has brought into your life is not quite the change that the difference that time has made since you grew up. Secondly, what will our future look like? I have underlined the word our because I'm not talking about the future of mankind. I'm not talking about future of the country. I'm talking about your and my future. Who's in the teaching business? What will our future look like? And to meet that future, what are the leadership skills that we can pick up from the Army? So these are the three things we're going to speak of. Now, the first question that should come to everybody's mind is, how far is that future that we are talking about? You know, as I was growing up through the ranks of the armed forces, we used to talk about China, and we used to say, you know, China will become the world's #1 power by the end of 21st century. Then it became 2050. Then some people started talking about 2025. No one really knew. It was all a fuzzy concept. So are we talking about future as is applicable 50 years from now, 25 years from now, or what? The fact of the matter is, we are going to talk about future which has already arrived. If you want me to say this in tangible terms, I'm going to talk about your and my future as it has arrived on to 5 years from now. There is a very sharp focus on what we are going to talk about today. We are not talking about some concept which is going to be applicable to our grandchildren or our children, but in our own lives. All right. So we all think of future, we all think of time as a blur. Things keep changing. The only constant in life is change. But you know, it isn't just the time that makes a difference. There are three things that make a difference, and we will talk about these three. Don't worry too much about the words that are written on the slide. When I explain these to you, you will realize what an interesting, intimate concept this is. We will go from bottom of the pyramid upwards. First, we will talk about how people who can exploit technology bring change in our lives in a way that our future changes. The second part we will talk about is something called the acceleration of change. And third, of course, is a black swan event like COVID-19. We'll talk about these three drivers. Let us start with how technology is bringing a change in your and my life wherever we are sitting. Now, you might say that the picture that you're looking on your screen is of a kirana shop, a pop and mom store, the kind of shops we have seen all our lives. That's a strange picture to see when you talk about technology, but you will discover why. These kirana stores are part of India's landscape. They have been a permanent feature of our lives. Even when I was growing up, my mom would sometimes say, rush to the shop, get me a kg of sugar and get me 2 packets of Parle-G biscuits or something like that. All right. Now these shops have endured because they have never posed a threat to big retail. The stuff these shops sell is limited. The variety is limited, the quantity is limited, the depth is limited. And what's more, it's pretty convenient. You can just rush down and pick up something. If you need just 1 kg of sugar and 2 packets of Parle-G biscuit, you're not going to go to a big bazaar. And the other reason why these shops have existed the way they have existed is because they're outside the online system. Just as you order things from Amazon, Flipkart, or if you've got Big Bazaar, or not Big Bazaar, but Red Basket or whatever, you can't order things from here like this. They are not online, they are offline. Now, many of you would have heard of the agreement which has happened between Reliance Jio and Facebook. All this is about to change in your and my life. Reliance is about to digitize 5 million of these kirana stores by the end of 2023. As a matter of fact, the experiment has already started in Mumbai in limited number of JioMart stores. So what will happen is that these 5 million stores, and hopefully even more than them, will all get digitized. Using your mobile phone and an app, you will be able to order that same very 1 kg of sugar and 2 packets of biscuit sitting from your home. Once you place an order, it will go to the nearest kirana shop. If that guy doesn't have it, it will go to the next kirana shop. And the kirana shop owner will simply tell one of his boys working in the shop, pick up the stuff, go deliver it to Mr. So-and-so. Now, can you imagine what this exploitation of technology will do to people who run big retail stores? How many people will now start driving down on a busy day for half an hour to an hour to get to a store and pick up stuff when everything is available right next to your house? And similarly, what will happen to the people who supply these stores to kirana stores? Because now Reliance will read the data, read the inventory, and replenish the stores. Now, the point I'm making is not that it's going to impact your and my life in a way that will impact the life of, say, Big Bazaar. The point I'm making is, if you don't understand technology and you don't understand how technology is exploited, there is a possibility that you and I will find ourselves obsolete sooner than we think. If you think I'm saying something incredible, do you recall that at the beginning of this year, before COVID happened, very many of us had never ever used the platform that you're using today, Zoom. It's been what, 3 to 4 months? And in these 3 to 4 months, suddenly you are flush with these platforms which everyone is using. And I've only listed 5, 6 of them. There are, as a matter of fact, many more. Today you can just go to your Gmail and start using it like a platform like Zoom. On the other side, how many of us were going online to receive any education? Today, suddenly, whole lot of platforms from Coursera to Unacademy to Code Academy to Udemy and edX. There are even apps or platforms like White Hat, which are teaching coding to children starting from class 1 to class 11. Now, we can ignore this, or we can ignore this at our peril. This is how the future is changing for us. Fortis, one of the big names in the medical world, has now tied up with Microsoft Teams. You know why? Because earlier you had to physically go to a doctor. But now the government of India has laid down a protocol by which you can consult a doctor sitting at your home. So Fortis has teamed up with Microsoft Teams in order to start doing telemedicine, which they've already done in thousands of cases. Now, these are just a couple of examples of how, if you don't watch technology carefully in your rear view mirror, chances are you'll miss out on something big. Let's look at accelerating change. Please look at the top corner of your screen. This wonderful book, Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. I was fortunate enough to read it back in 1975 or 76. The crux of this book is that it is not change that creates difficulties for us in the future. After all, change has happened forever. Change happened in our grandfather's time, in our father's time, in our time, and will continue to happen. Change is a constant. The problem that is occurring is that change is accelerating. What used to take 100 years to change or 75 years to change is now changing in 5 years. I'm going to give you a few examples. And that change means that unless you keep up with the change, within 4 to 5 years or 10 years, you will find that the world has changed completely. Imagine the people who didn't bother to learn anything about internet, who thought internet was just a fancy technology and they will have no use to it. Today, surely they struggle because they have not kept up with the change. Let's look at a couple of examples. Just 40 years ago, not even more than 40 years ago, how did we interact with each other and how did we entertain ourselves? I've drawn a couple of lines at the bottom of the slide. The bottom line starts with 1900. 1927 is the year when my father was born. He's with me, he's 92. 1950 when I was born. And 2020 is the present year. For literally 70 of these years, the only form of entertainment available to us was radio. Electronically, all that you could listen to was a radio. Radio kept changing some, from radio to smaller radio to transistor radio, but it was just radio. When I was studying in the school, I would rush back home to listen to a program on the radio. There was nothing else. 70 years later, in 1982, we got color television. In fact, end of 70s, we got black and white television. And 82, when the Asian Games came, we got color television. And then a few short years, in 30 short years, we've had a whole lot of technology, entertainment coming into our lives and disappearing. We had Walkman, we had VCD, we had a VCR, we had spool tape recorders, we have smaller tape recorders, we had all sorts of stuff. Where is it gone? It just keeps mutating till all the entertainment has come into that small little gizmo that you're carrying today, your mobile phone. That is the speed, that is the acceleration of change we are experiencing. And what was the social media with you? The only social media with me when I was growing up was to go to the neighbor's house and talk, or to meet my friend in the street and talk. That is how we interacted with each other, pretty much till the end of 1990s. And then some of the lucky ones got a phone. You remember the days when you had to wait 10 years to get a phone? And even then you could make a call only to your people living in the same city. As a matter of fact, in 1984, when I was serving in J&K and there was rioting in North India, I wanted to call up my wife. I was recently married. And I had to go to a post office to book a call. And I had to wait for an hour to get the call through. That is how it was even in 1984. Then some of us luckily got STD. And not only we got STD, but all over India you saw yellow colored boards appearing which said STD, ISD, internet. Just as quickly as they came, they've disappeared. And they've disappeared because all of us have got a phone which has got all these facilities. And how did we take pictures? Most of our lives, we took pictures using a conventional camera. You had to pose correctly because you were wasting a film. And after clicking a picture, you had to wait for 7 to 10 days to find out how you looked. Today, you can instantly take your own picture, see how you look. You can change the picture the way you like. You can put a filter. You can do all sorts of stuff. And then with the advent of social media, everything has changed. Today, you are literally connected to just about anybody in the world. You can make friends in America, Venezuela, Brazil, Africa, wherever you want. You can talk to people face to face. We don't seem to talk about these changes because, we're living through these. But the fact of the matter is, the day we decide that these changes are not important, we are going to lose out. Even a couple of things that we use every day, WhatsApp and the smartphone, are only 10 to 12 years old in India. In fact, WhatsApp is less than a decade old. And see how it has taken over your lives. We don't even know how to digest. Therefore, we need to look at how quickly the change is occurring if we want to be good leaders, because this change is shaping our immediate future. I'm going to give you a second and the last fascinating example. Just a few years ago, when you went to Pune or Mumbai or even in your own city, how did you ask for directions? You got off your scooter or your car and you asked a stranger. And what did the stranger tell you? The stranger gave you the direction based on his or her best piece of understanding. Sometimes he confused you. Sometimes strangers told us, aap jaiye, isse nazdeek hi hai. And that thing happened to be 2 kilometers away. And some strangers said, yahan se bahut dur hai. And that place was just 500 meters away. It depended on the stranger. Now, just 15 years ago, we got a new gizmo called Google Maps. Have you realized that it has made all strangers obsolete from your life in as much it comes to asking for directions? You have a little smartphone that not only tells you how much time will you take, which is the best route, where you might find toll, where there is more traffic, where there is an accident, everything. It tells you the approximate time of arrival down to the last minute. And it even talks to you. Again, we don't live, since we are living through this, we don't seem to realize this. But so many human beings whom we used to ask directions have simply disappeared. And how did we decide which movie to watch? You asked a friend. And the friend told you which movie to watch based on her or his liking. If you like Jitendra or Shah Rukh Khan or Salman, he told you this is a good movie, better go and watch this. There was one requirement. The movie had to be running in the theater. And now, just 4 years ago, we started getting things like Netflix. Today, you're not only flush with choices. You have Netflix, you have Hotstar, you have Amazon Prime, you have Airtel. You travel in a metro, you see practically everybody watching movies. And not only are you watching movies, you never have to ask a friend now, because based on an algorithm, Netflix tells you which is the next movie you should watch. Because Netflix is watching you while you're watching a movie. This is the kind of fascinating change that is taking place in our lives every day. And like I again said, if you're not watchful, we are going to be obsolete. The third and the final type of change is Black Swan event. Now, the name Black Swan comes from an incident, an historical incident, where back in before 1900, people believed that the only swans that existed were white in color. Then back in about 1867, I think it was, that some European scientists traveled to Australia and they saw black swans. They were surprised. So anytime there is an event which is unprecedented, unpredictable, which is likely to have a big impact in your life, started to be called the black swan event. There have been several black swan events. I can give you the examples of a few. As you can see, 9/11 probably can be called a black swan event. COVID-19 definitely is a black swan event. The arrival of internet is a positive black swan event. The 2008 subprime lending meltdown in the US, leading to all economies in the world, was a black swan event. All these are black swan event. So please remember that while these events are supposed to be unprecedented and they are supposed to have a large impact, we are not helpless. The problem is, if you're not looking carefully, if you don't predict these events, you can. May I request Naina to switch off her mic? Thank you. So, you know, when COVID occurred in that the animal meat market in Wuhan, it was definitely a black swan event for Wuhan. Probably it was a black swan event for China too. But I personally feel that since we knew this from January onwards, it needn't have been such a black swan event for the rest of us. For all the governments in the world, I'm not talking about India. So therefore, the lesson is that while some events are unprecedented, if you learn how to predict, look ahead positively, chances are that you will be able to surmount the challenge of such an event. Having spoken about these three things, the lesson is clear. If you're not careful, the future can render us obsolete. Do you realize what has happened to all the bookstores in the world? I served in Pune for 3 years towards the end of my career. There were such fabulous bookstores, Landmark, others. They all disappeared one by one because something else overtook, online shopping. What's going to happen to the cruise ships? They didn't realize that when there's a pandemic, they'll be out of business. Similarly, you can look at the picture of an air conditioner. I was CEO of an education society that used to run 92 schools and colleges. One day I called the principal of the ITI and I said, we run a 2-year course in refrigeration and air conditioning. And even now, we call an outsider from the market to maintain our ACs. We literally had thousands of ACs. I said, why don't we give it to our kids? Our students who are attending a 2-year course should maintain the ACs and all the money should go to them. And I was amazed with the answer. The principal said, it can't be done because split AC is not taught in the syllabi in the ITI in the 2-year course. I said, why not? He said, it's not there in the syllabus. The syllabus has been made many years ago. So I said, all right, you get the syllabus to me. I will cross out a few things and we'll introduce this. He said, it can't be done because the teachers who are teaching it, it was not there in their syllabus either. Do you realize how we are making ourselves obsolete by not looking ahead, by not keeping up with the times? I've given you all these examples in a generic way, but they apply very closely to the art and science of leadership in your life as faculty. I'm going to come to that. So what does the future look like? We'll talk about 3 things and we will come to examples or lessons from the army on how to meet the challenge. The first thing that you and I must realize is that we have come into an aspirational world. Gone are the days of, we had a feudal mindset, whether in the army or outside. We had a mindset that so long as you are senior, so long as you're wearing a rank on your shoulders, so long as you are a biggie, a principal, or a general manager or a vice president or whatever, people will automatically respect you. And people did, because feudalism was on our minds. That has changed dramatically. We live in an aspirational world. People still salute us. People still wish us, but they're not doing it out of respect every time. They're doing it because it's convenient. Therefore, if you're a leader, you've got to realize that you have to do something about this business of equality. What do you have to do? What does the army do? I'll come to that. The second big change is that today we are competing with the whole world and with technology. There was a time when if you were a sweater maker in Ludhiana, you were competing with another sweater maker sitting in the next street. No longer. You're competing with somebody sitting in Beijing or Shanghai or Vietnam or Cambodia, or if you're into manufacturing clothes out of cotton, you're competing with somebody in Bangladesh. You are competing with the rest of the world. And even as educationists, today you're going to compete with technology. The world is swinging towards EdTech. Will it entirely become EdTech? No. I will come to that in a bit. But our competition is with world and with technology. We ignore this at our own peril. The third and the last thing is, we live in a distracted world. Everybody's looking at their cell phone. Everybody's just writing some language on a WhatsApp which doesn't at all look like English. Tweets of 140 characters or more have become the ultimate in wisdom. So we are increasingly living in a world of superficiality and attention deficit. People are not paying attention anymore. People are also not paying attention because they are bombarded with information, entertainment, distractions from all directions. What should you do as a leader about all this? That is the crux of our problem. Now we come to the 3 lessons for leaders as learned from the army and as learned from a lifetime of experience of having lived an intense life. The 3 answers are given at the bottom of the screen, but I'm going to explain to you with some stories from the armed forces, with some examples and so on. The first lesson from the army is you can only lead by example. Right in the beginning, Mr. Pramod alluded to it. There is no bigger lesson of leadership. If you think merely standing on a pulpit and saying things is going to make people believe in you, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. Even our own children don't believe in us beyond a certain point if they see that our example is different from what we are doing. May I request Ms. Nana to please switch off your mic? Ms. Nana, okay? Thank you. Your mic is still not off, please. Right. So if you're not prepared to lead by example, then please be prepared to live the life of an ordinary manager, an ordinary teacher, or someone who's just going to be remembered because he was there. Leading by example is the crux of all issues, and I'm going to tell you what it means. Back in 1997, in the middle of the uncertainty and disruption, much bigger than what you're seeing because of COVID, a commanding officer received some advice on what leading by example means. And he got it from his barber, the army barber, somebody who wears a uniform or cuts your hair. The commanding officer in question was me. It all happened on the 4th of June, 1997. I was traveling in a vehicle. I went over a piece of road. It was a Kacha road. And while I went over it and I survived, 10 minutes afterwards, the militants blew up the next vehicle. They had planted a huge amount of explosive under the road, and using a remote control, sitting on top of a hill, nearly about 300 to 400 meters away, they blew up the vehicle. The vehicle was tossed up. It went up higher than the eucalyptus trees and crashed against the road. It instantly killed 1 officer, Major Mohit Vig, and 2 of the soldiers serving with me. 1 young lieutenant, Ravi Loganathan, and 2 soldiers were very badly injured. In fact, they were almost paralyzed. They were trapped in this vehicle that you can see on your picture. Trapped inside this mangled steel with other dead bodies and mortal remains, the militants started firing at the vehicle, wanting to kill the rest of the guys and to take away the weapons. I heard this huge blast because I was 10 minutes ahead. I turned around and we were advised to leave our vehicles and to start going on foot because there could be more mines. We started running towards the firing. We were all carrying our AK-47s. Running on one side was an officer and the other side was a barber. After we ran a little while, the officer stopped me. You know, those of you who paid attention to army officers' uniforms, you would know that when you are a senior officer, colonel and above, you wear a red colored tab on your collars. We laughingly call it lipstick on the collar. So when you become a colonel, you start wearing a red colored tab on your collar, and that's visible from a distance. Now the norm is, you don't wear it during operations. You don't wear it in field areas because the enemy will instantly know who's the commander and he'll be the first guy to be killed. I was wearing it. So the officer running next to me, Major Dev, stopped me and said, "Sir, please take off these red tabs. You're not supposed to be wearing it. It's not in the rules. And I've seen you wear it all the time. If something happens to you, there'll be then more chaos. So you should take it off." So I said, "Yeah, I will take it off." But I immediately did not. In the meanwhile, we learned that 3 people had died. We ran a little more. And then this barber stopped me and said, "Can I have a word with you?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Sir, जो आपको अभी सलाह दिया मेजर साहब ने, वो बड़ा अच्छा सलाह है. ये जो लाल रंग का आप पहन के घूम रहे हो, इसमें कोई बहादुरी नहीं है. अभी कोई मिलिटेंट आपको देखेगा, वो आपको मार देगा, फिर भगदड़ मच जाएगी, क्योंकि सीओ साहब मर गया तो फिर तो बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. सो आप इसको निकाल दो." So I looked at him and I said, "Rooplal, तेरी बात ठीक है." He said, "लेकिन मेरी सलाह एक और है. इसको आज नहीं निकालना, इसको अगले 3 महीने नहीं निकालना. किसी जवान को ऐसा नहीं लगना चाहिए कि 2-3 लोग मारे जाते हैं, शहीद हो जाते हैं, हमारे सीओ साहब घबरा जाते हैं." This was the crater that I saw when I reached there. Can you think of a better advice on leadership and leading by example? That no matter what happens, no matter what the risk to your own life, no matter what sacrifice you are required to make, no matter what the cost, you've got to lead by example so that the people down below you feel assured that they are working under a leader and not somebody who's just there for a transaction, to use the words of Mr. Pramod. You might say, "Good story, very nice for the army. Why should I do it?" I'll tell you why you should do it. The reason why every person who strives to be a leader should do it is this. Because when you lead by example, it reassures your team and it makes them perform like champions. Remember a time when you are young, you're at night and you're scared about something, it's pitch dark, there is a noise outside the house, and your father says, "Don't worry, I'll go and check." What is he doing? He's leading by example. You feel reassured. What do you think of leaders who, the moment there is a crisis, just dump you and just disappear from the scene? What do you think of them? Please remember this. But the good question is, what should leading by example mean to you? Now, I am not in a position to give homework to faculty, but I would request you to do a small exercise for me at the end of this talk. Please sit down and think coolly. What are the 2 things you can do to lead your class, your students, or whoever you lead by example? What are the 2 things you can do? What are the 2 things you can do as a parent? And believe me, this is going to be a very up. Let me give you a few tips. The first thing to do in leading by example is that you must work harder than the people you command, the people you lead. People watch you. They look at your quality of your work. Nobody's blind. They may not point out because you're senior, but if they see the teacher or the leader or the principal or the commander working harder, they definitely follow you to death. The second thing, protect the people. Don't protect yourself. I'll give you a couple of examples. Recently, Major Babu, Colonel Babu of my regiment was martyred at Galwan. The first day when you heard the news from Chinese border, you heard the CO and 2 Jawans have died. Did you ever wonder that when CO is commanding a battalion of 800 to 1,000 people, why is it the CO who has to go and die? Why does he take all the risk? When you pick up the newspaper and read news from J&K, every time you hear about a clash with the militants, you would read, usually, 1 officer, 1 Jawan martyred, 4 militants killed. When the ratio of army officers to Jawans is 1:100, have you ever wondered why does an army officer get killed every now and then? You know why? Because they insist on protecting their team. They want to be up front. Are they supermen? Of course not. Army guys come from the exact same background, exact same demographic, exact same circumstances as everybody else. Whether you're working in the PWD or you're working in a government department or in Reliance, you have the same background. Back in 1998, the BBC came and made a film on my unit. It was called The Unfinished War. If anybody wants me to share a link, I can share it afterwards. It was on Kashmir. And BBC wanted to film a live operation. They didn't want a drama because for BBC, credibility is everything. One day, after a month, a live operation took place. While we were going for the operation, the BBC team, which was very experienced, they had worked in Afghanistan, in Kosovo, in Croatia, and a number of places. They were heavily insured. They were all wearing bulletproof jackets and helmets and all that. The producer of the film, Phil Rees, looked at me and said, "Colonel, why aren't you wearing a bulletproof jacket?" So I said, "It's a personal reason and I don't like to give the answer." He said, "I'm not filming you. I'm not recording it. You can tell me, why would you go into an operation where bullets are going to fly and not wear a bulletproof jacket?" So I said, "All right, look around. In 1998, all Jawans did not have bulletproof jackets. In fact, 25 to 50% only had bulletproof jackets. I said, look around. No officer that you can see is wearing a bulletproof jacket. No officer of the army will protect himself more than the troops he commands. It doesn't matter what the cost is. Think about it. When there is problem in your class, when there is a problem in your college, when you face a difficulty while organizing a seminar, when somebody does a mistake under you, and I'll come to mistakes, there are many times when people want protection. People are willing to die for each other in the army because they feel safe. They know they will be protected. Even if they're shot, they'll be protected. So remember, leading from the front. Secondly, I already talked about Galwan. You got to be visible. You know why that CO was up front? Because the more you're visible, the more you're in the midst of action, the more reassuring it is for your team. Let's say you've been told to organize a seminar, a workshop in your college, or you're head of a team which is looking after the NAC accreditation. If you just distribute work and then not be seen there, chances are the work is not going to get done well. Be visible. What did our kings do in the olden days? They came riding on elephants, which is a very impractical vehicle when you're fighting with a sword. But why were they on an elephant? So that everybody could see them. The more visible you are, the more reassured people feel. That's what the Prime Minister does when he goes to Ladakh. That is what you need to do. Be visible. Don't be locked behind a door. Now, this point that I'm giving you is not a moral lecture. These are all practical issues. They are not from a book. In fact, nothing in today's presentation is from a book. Set the highest standards for yourself. Isn't it ironical that many people expect us to follow high standards when their own standards of dressing up, conduct, teamwork, discipline are poor? If I'm going to come late and I'm going to pull up people who come late or submit their work late, don't you see the irony of it? And therefore, your and my standards need to be higher. That's the only way you will meet an aspirational world, a world which is no longer willing to do Jai Hind and Namaskar Sir based on our seniority. I'm glad I had this slide because this answers Mr. Pramod's one of his questions. All leadership must be relational. All leadership must be transformational. And the reason this slide is here because I was in Pune attending a meeting of Maratha Chambers and somebody was giving a talk on leadership. And somebody in the audience got up and said, he said, all leadership is supposed to be transactional. आपको काम है, आप काम देते हो, दूसरा आदमी काम करता है, तो leadership है. So at what point should it become relational? I was aghast. I was surprised. No leadership is transactional. As Mr. Pramod hit the nail on the head, it is not about give and take. Leadership is called give and give. That's how you lead. When your child sits in your lap and spoils your clothes by peeing on them, you don't say, "Tumne ye kiya, main tere ko bhi thapad marunga," or we are equal. We are transactional. Isn't it? You reach out with a larger heart. That is what you need to do. Let's come to the second lesson. Be competent and learn to motivate. That is a big secret. That's the secret sauce of the armed forces. How do you motivate others? I'm not going to talk about your academic competence because you're far, far, far more competent than I can ever dream to be. But I will talk about a couple of things in which you should be competent. And one of them is to be motivated. But let's first ask a question. What qualifies the guy from the army to talk about this motivation? Is Indian Army really a very highly motivated army? Or could it be that we have just romantically, we have romanticized the idea because we like guys in the uniform. They do all sorts of hard stuff. Once in a while, they get martyred. They live in cantonments which are definitely neater than the areas around. The country depends on them. When a child falls in a bore well, you still need the army to do it. If there's a Commonwealth game going on or a bridge falls in Commonwealth games or in Mumbai, you need the army. All that is fine. That is a regular job. Don't get impressed by that. I'm going to give you a reason why you should look at the motivation levels of the Indian Army. Back in 1999, Pakistanis came and captured some of our posts which were vacant in the area of Kargil. One of the presumptions the Pakistani army had made was that when the summer season starts, there will be no cover whatsoever on the hills. And no army, Indian army or any other army, will be suicidal enough to come up the hills completely bare when we are shooting from the top and to get killed. They will never do it. So we will finally have control of these hills forever. That was the assumption. It didn't quite happen like that. We decided to get 556 of our people killed, 1,000 people maimed, but we took the Kargil back. At the end of the war, the Time magazine, of its edition of July 1999, published a page from a diary of a Pakistani officer who was sitting on top of the hill, who eventually withdrew, who ran away. I am producing that page verbatim. You don't have to read the whole page because I have conveniently underlined the good stuff for you. He says, it started in May. We mowed down many of them. Those Indians were crazy. They came like ants. You see 4 and you kill them. Then 10, then 50, then 100. We just keep killing them and they keep coming. Sometimes in such large numbers that we got scared that we will run out of ammunition. Now, this story is not only about courage. The story is the secret sauce that we in the army are able to lead people till they believe in all this. And believe me, it is not propaganda, it is not brainwashing. There is something else at work. Now, how do you motivate? I'm going to tell you 4 things. 3 are listed on the slide. The first thing, please remember that just as you work for self-interest, everybody else works for self-interest. Sometimes we think my self-interest is important, but when somebody else asks a question, somebody else wants to be, say, take a day off or whatever, we suddenly start thinking, no. Now, I'm not saying you should become very liberal. All I'm saying is worry about other people's self-interest. And please remember one thing, it's not always about money. The corporate sector has got this horribly wrong. If money was the reason why people got motivated, nobody in the army would fight. Because even for dying, you don't get more money. You don't get bonus because you decide to die in Kargil. So therefore, what else is at play? I'll tell you what else is at play. People work for many reasons. Of course, money is important. Of course, money is an important factor, but people also work for attention. They work for recognition. They work for acknowledgement. They work for love. There are many people who come to office or to this place of work or to a class wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be recognized, because there is a degree of void, a degree of lovelessness in their own lives. You as a leader need to identify that, and you have to reach out to that. A commanding officer of an infantry battalion who commands 800 people knows every individual by name and by his family traits. He's supposed to know everybody's problems. And that is how the entire army remains motivated. So think of people's self-interest. You don't always have to meet it. I'm not saying that you should become so liberal that only self-interest begins to matter. But no, but look at it. Sometime walking across a class and tapping a student slightly on the shoulder and saying, "Maine suna to badi mehnat kar raha hai aajkal," is enough to transform him or her. And yet we don't do it. Appreciate. That's the oxygen of the soul, for the soul. When you like somebody, when you appreciate someone, it works beautifully. At this note, I really got to appreciate a couple of people right here. Preeti Guge, I think she's from Aurangabad. She's online here, I can see her. She was one of my students in the faculty development program. I appreciate the fact that she's taken the trouble to listen to this talk, which she must have heard even earlier. And similarly, I've got a friend, Deepti Kanpal here. There's Snail, there's others. You got to appreciate when people do something for you like this. Third thing, all the time I hear people saying, you know, I would have been a great guy if my team was good. I don't have a good team. I have a weak team. I have news for you. I did 41 years in uniform. I never had more than 10 to 15% great guys. Not only I never had, nobody ever has. Let's stop complaining. The broad law of organization is you will have 10 to 15%, about 80% good people who can be motivated, and 5% trouble creators. You only have to worry about 5% people. Right? So use that core team well and use your motivation skills to motivate everyone else. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is perhaps arguably the most important element of motivation. How do we correct people's mistakes? Because, you know, on one side, you need to motivate people. On the other side, you got to correct people. You got to pull up people when they do wrong things. How does it work? This is how it works. All mistakes are not the same. There is a mistake of judgment. For example, the principal calls you, you're a senior, you're the head of the department, and he says, look, we have to organize a, placement. Send one of your junior professors to this company and just tie up everything and make sure that, they are willing to come here because we want to do the placement here. The professor goes there, he meets the MD of the company or the CEO of the company, and the CEO says, we'll do the placement, but we are not willing to come there. We want to do it here. And whatever you want to give me an answer now. If you can't give me an answer now, I have other colleges lined up. I'm not going to wait. The professor tries to reach you, but there's no network. He takes a call. He says, better than not having a placement, let's have a placement here. When he comes back the next morning, he tells you, placement to hoga, lekin wo factory mein hoga. And you get worried. You are worried because the principal is not going to like it. What should you do? I'll tell you what you should do. This is just an error of judgment. You should overlook it. As a leader, you should absorb it. You should simply say, अच्छा, वैसे principal साहब को पसंद नहीं आएगा, पर चलो कोई बात नहीं, मैं defend करूँगा तेरे को. You know why you should do this? Because if you don't do this, nobody under you will ever take initiative. You will kill all initiative. Next time, nobody will take a decision. They will say, जब मेरे को head of the department बताएगा, तभी मैं कुछ करूँगा. I always give a funny example, you know, in this talk. I say, you know, let's say you've gone out of your house, और पीछे से some salesman comes. घर में there is a maid servant. Maid servant सोचती है कि ये salesman शायद साहब का कोई दोस्त होगा, because he's well dressed. She makes him sit, gives him a cup of tea, gives him biscuits, tells him to wait. When you walk into the house, you realize that she's made a mistake. You have two choices. One, to go to the kitchen immediately and say, तुम अंधी हो क्या? ये आदमी मेरा तुम्हें दोस्त लगता है? तुम पूछ नहीं सकती थी? ये पैसे पेड़ों पे उगते हैं? कल को कोई चोरी करके ले जाएगा? All right, you can pull her up, or you can, after he is gone, you can just smile and say, अरे भैया दोस्त नहीं था मेरा, चलो कोई बात नहीं, चाय पिला दी ना, अच्छा किया. You know what is the difference? The difference is, if you take the first step, next time when your uncle comes, when your chacha comes, she's not going to give you a cup of tea unless you sanction it. You would have killed all initiative. So decide for yourself. Do you want to produce tigers in your organization, or do you want to produce rabbits? Error of judgment, overlook. You guide, but overlook. Second is the error of laziness, which is the main error. Most people are lazy. When you give somebody a job, he starts giving you advice back. अरे सर ऐसे नहीं होता, मैं आपको बताऊंगा कैसे करें. Basically, you don't want to do it. Okay? Or there is an error of omission. Such people need to be pulled up. Pull them up, brief them, retrain them if required, pull them up again, give them a memo. फिर भी बात नहीं बनती तो फिर you know what to do. Error of laziness, pull up. There is an error of intention. जानबूझ के a man goes out, lets down the college or the department. Somebody makes money. Somebody misbehaves with a woman, a lady in the college, or a student. That is error of intention. That is the error you must never forgive. Pick up that person and throw him out. If somebody tries to make money in the army or misbehave with a woman, he is going to get court-martialed, no questions asked. So please remember, error of judgment, overlook. Error of laziness, pull up and correct. Error of intention, take expeditious, strong action. That is how you motivate people. What should you be competent about? Cultivate discipline. What is discipline? Discipline is only the ability to take pain first and have pleasure later. A student who goes home and decides to have a look at his book for the next day, rather than watching YouTube or Facebook or, you know, some movie, is always going to succeed. Same goes for your life. Same goes for my life. Do the hard thing first. There is a famous marshmallow test, which was done in the early 1960s by the Americans. It was done by the Stanford University. You can Google and read it. In the marshmallow test, they put some 20 or 30 children in a classroom. They put on the table some marshmallow. Let's call it toffees, candies, chocolate, whatever. They told the students, we are going out. The chocolates are lying or the candy is lying on on the table. Anybody who wants one chocolate or one candy can take it immediately. But anybody who waits for 20 minutes will get two. And they left the class. The entire activity was filmed on a CCTV. As you would guess, many children just got up and picked up one toffee. Some children struggled with themselves for 10 minutes. And there were other children who waited for 20 minutes. Now, Americans being Americans, they researched this whole thing. They followed the lives of these people for 50, 60, 70 years. And you know what they found? Every single child who had waited became a winner in his life because self-discipline was already in his soul. They became healthier, they got better SAT scores, they got better jobs. Every single child. That is the power of self-discipline. And therefore, let's cultivate this and let's avoid a life of distraction. All this business of social media, etc., etc. How do you do? Now, this is a topic in itself. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm going to recommend you these two books. A book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, which talks extensively of the fact that the world is becoming superficial. Anybody who's willing to be not distracted and put in a little bit of work is going to become champion. He'll be the leader people will follow. And the other book, which is perhaps the most important book I've read, The Road Less Traveled, which talks about discipline, love, and spirituality. They're worth reading the books. Anybody wants me to give him this PDF book by mail, just get in touch with me. I'll be very happy to share with you. The third and the last lesson, applicable definitely for COVID, but also post-COVID, is prepare, prepare, prepare. How does the army do this? You see, the army is always battling uncertainty. When you go into an operation, when you go into a jungle at night to do the operation, you don't know which side is the enemy. When you hear the AK-47 fire, who's firing first? Is it the enemy? Is it you? There is so much uncertainty. This is how the army prepares. First of all, the army carries out reconnaissance and surveillance, which means army always watches the enemy. On the border, everywhere, we watch the enemy using our eyes, using our binoculars, using our infrared devices, using thermal imaging, using drones, using helicopters, using aircraft, using satellite pictures. We are looking at the enemy all the time. Why am I telling you all this? The first lesson from this is, please start looking at the threats of your future. As a leader, as an individual, start thinking, what threat does this COVID pose to me in the coming 6 months, 1 year, or more? But equally importantly, look for opportunities. The army is not doing all this just to look for threats and get scared. There are new opportunities opening up. Maybe some of you can create online courses. I've done one. I've created a course on Udemy. Maybe some of you can, maybe your college will start pivoting towards, more online education. You don't know. So start looking for opportunities. But the most important part is, when the army uses this, does this reconnaissance and surveillance, I request somebody to switch off the mic, please. I think it's Dr. Avish. So, when the army does reconnaissance and surveillance, they don't use the maps of Rajasthan to navigate in Nagaland. That would be horrible, isn't it? Similarly, what sources are you using for your information? Are you using WhatsApp? Is that the university you're following? Then I'm afraid you're in deep trouble. Are you listening to any madcap who comes and makes a very fiery speech, shouts on the television? Are you following such people? Then you are in big trouble. Please check your sources. Listen to the Bill Gates of this world. Listen to the wise guys, even our leaders for that matter. Listen to the scientists. Read some good papers. Do not rely on the wrong sources because you will only come to wrong conclusions. Can you imagine the number of rumors that have spread since the day COVID started? Have any of that come true? Please check your sources. Therefore, at the end of this talk, review the source of your information. Please remember that if you don't review it, what can go wrong with your health, with your money, with your relationship and your time? If you continue down the same road without looking for opportunities and threats. And when you think of an opportunity, discuss with somebody who's well informed. Don't just look at WhatsApp or some forward and make up your mind. You know, in the last 4 or 5 months, I've realized the power of crowdsourcing. I've reached out to many people, many experts, many friends who are experts in their own areas, and I've taken knowledge from them. It's a very powerful tool. Even if you reach out to strangers, they'll give you knowledge. So realize the power of crowdsourcing. The second lesson, the army makes actionable plans. The army doesn't make some fuzzy idea sitting on a sofa set and saying, देख लेंगे जब Chinese आएंगे कुछ ना कुछ कर लेंगे, ठीक है जब अटैक होगा तब देखेंगे. All right. Yet most of them do not have an actionable plan. Actionable plan is not a worry. It's not a dream. It's a plan. And when you make a plan, you first have to develop the right perspective, which you can do by reading the right sources, which I already pointed out. Please remember, when you make a plan for your life for the next 6 months, for 1 year, it has to have a timeline. It has to have a goal. It has to specifically say, how much sacrifice are you willing to make? For example, if you say, I'm going to complete my PhD. By when? What is your goal to do that? How much time per day are you willing to spare? How much cost are you willing to incur to that? How much are you willing to, your family is going to suffer while you are ignoring them and studying for PhD? You got to make a plan. You might still succeed doing it haphazardly, you know, but a plan is important. So please list your goals with clarity and honesty, and then take a resolution. I'm going to stick to the plan. Preferably break down your plan in smaller actions. Let's say I hear a lot of students tell me, or people tell me, you know, sir, I'm going to read a lot of books. And I say, how? They say, I'll read a lot of books. That's not a plan. If you decided that I will read 10 pages a day at 7 a.m. every morning while I'm waiting for breakfast, that's a plan. Break it down to smaller actions and take a resolution. Whatever plan you make, review it. I do this, I've done this for years. Every first of the month, sit down and say, last month I planned this. Did it go like this? Or am I supposed to change? The last advice is perhaps a very, very important advice in the time of COVID. You know, all of us are anxious. We are worried. We are worried for our future. We are worried for our children's future. We are worried for money. Some of us are worried for jobs. All of that. The question that you have to ask is, when you're lying in your bed and worrying, is this worry useful? All worry is not bad. If you're worrying about, say, if you're a student and you're worrying about exam, that's a damn good worry. But if you're worrying about something that you can do nothing about, please resolve to throw it out of the window. If you're worrying about something that you can do, get up in the morning and start doing it. This is a valuable advice that you should take from an army guy. The third and the last thing I'm going to talk about is make contingency plans. I always tell this to people, and I'm sure people laugh at it. The army makes a plan for everything, including a dinner party. You have a plan A and you have a plan B. If you're going to have a dinner for a VIP in the lawn, you will have the exact arrangement inside the hall if it rains. It's very important to have a plan B. So please, in your life, think, if this doesn't work out in 2 years, if you're not able to complete your PhD, what are you going to do? How are you going to pivot? Visualize all the things that might happen. It's not important. It's not enough to just write down a contingency. The contingency has to be valid. For example, if you say, I think in 2 years' time, I'll have to move to Kolkata, or I have to look for a job in Kolhapur. Visualize. Will it really happen? Will your family move? How exactly will it work? So making a contingency plan just for the heck of it is not important. But in your life as an educationist, please remember that you need contingency plans. You know why? First of all, we are heading towards probably a hybrid model of education. The brick and mortar colleges and universities will always be there. Nobody's going to take that away. But if we continue to have the onslaught of pandemic, we continue to have disruptions, you might have a hybrid model as you are having today. There's going to be some online education and there's going to be some offline education. What is your plan for that? Digital platforms will become the order of the day. They already have. Going forward, it will not be important only to have domain knowledge. You also need knowledge of technology, as you must have realized in the last 4 to 5 months. Right? People today who are looking for jobs on the New York Stock Exchange don't need a degree only in accounting. They also need a degree in coding, in software, because technology has become the king. Please upgrade your contemporary knowledge. Do not make yourself obsolete. One of the reasons why so many children are not employable is because what is being taught to them is not always immediately useful outside. I know this because I've interacted with the industry, trying to get jobs from the children of my engineering colleges. And this is a good time to upskill. It doesn't matter what you want to learn, but think about it and upskill. You might say, this is a good talk. What's the time? Well, at the risk of giving a personal example, I'll tell you what I've done. In the last 8 to 9 months, while I was working, running a company full time, I have taken a certification in life coaching, a certification in leadership coaching. I've become a lead auditor for occupational safety and health under ISO 45001. And as we speak, last Saturday and Sunday, and the coming Saturday and Sunday, I'm attending a course to become an independent director, which I will appear for an exam in the month of August. The idea is not to tell you about myself, that what a great guy I am. The idea is that we want to make time, we will find time. You got to upskill. That is how your contingency plans will come good. Which brings me pretty much to the end of this talk. Thank you for being such a patient audience. I've taken more than an hour. If you have any questions whatsoever, I'll be delighted to take it on. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so that we can see each other and we can ask each other questions. Thank you. There is while you're thinking of your questions, there is a comment made by Amit Chauhan, where he said, I suppose we live in a social media aspirational world more than a personally satisfying world. It's more marketing than just saying. So I think Pramod's already answered that question. Not really. You know, it's not a glass half full or half empty. In fact, it's a half glass full. It depends on what you use the social media for. It depends on how you use it. It depends on who you follow on the Twitter. Not all social media is bad. As a matter of fact, it has placed immense power in your hands to become an author, a publisher, a thought leader, all in one go, provided you use it well. All right. Is there any questions from anyone? Please unmute or write it in the chat and I'll answer it. All right. So if there are no other questions, I will turn it back to whoever is moderating it. I want to thank you once again. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Delighted to see so many people on board this thing. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Before you leave, I must say today, being a part of your webinar, it almost felt we are standing in the borders with all the tensions that is not just with Corona, but also the border disputes and all the, the war inadvertently enters your bedroom. Social networking and the device that you're having, is so powerful that you can't help noticing all the turmoil, everything that is happening around you to such an extent that people sometimes get worried, if they just step out of their compound, they will get attacked. So in such a situation, how to keep myself motivated? This probably I'm putting it as a question on behalf of all my dear colleagues. And also our respected principal, had another question, which was, as a leader, how to stay motivated, by themselves when everything around, appears to be so challenging. How does the leader stay motivated by himself? What are his sources of motivation? Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, great questions. So first of all, there is one secret which every soldier knows and is worth sharing about anxiety, uncertainty, fear, remaining motivated in times like COVID. We are living through unprecedented times. But you know something? Every soldier knows that your fears are the biggest, worst liars in the world. What you fear rarely comes true. Your fears don't come true. Something else might happen. Who had imagined COVID will happen while you were fearing about something else?
True.
So we are possibly overestimating this problem in the short run, or the other way around maybe. We are underestimating in the short run and we are overestimating in the long run. Let me explain. In the short run, many people didn't bother about COVID and didn't do social distancing and so on. We thought it'll just disappear. President Trump also said it'll disappear. Underestimation. But we should not be fearful because there is too much ingenuity among the human beings. We are too large a market for things not to shape up again very soon. Okay, even speaking in terms of economy, we are not dependent on only exports. We got enough people inside the house to sell, inside the house to take care of. So my take is, as we do in the operations too, fears don't fear because it's not going to come true. Now, how does a leader remain motivated himself in this? That's the second secret. The secret is this. Every army guy who goes into battle is scared. Every army officer, every leader who goes into battle has fear in his heart. Somebody else is telling you this, he's telling you a lie. In fact, Manekshaw once laughed and said, anyone who says he's not scared of dying is either lying or he's a Gurkha.
He's a Gurkha.
Okay, but the fact is even Gurkhas are scared. So what do? This is what you do. You force yourself to maintain an exterior of calmness. Sound like pretending? Sound like acting? Yes. Two things happen when you do this. One, your brain starts sending signals to your body, or your body starts sending signals to your brain. And you actually start feeling calmer. You start feeling motivated. When you get up in the morning and say optimistically, this is going to turn out well. This is definitely turning out well. If not today, it's going to turn out well very soon. Your entire behavior and conduct will change because you're not fooling yourself. You're simply letting negative thoughts out of your mind. So what used to happen is when there was firefights in which I have participated many times, when you're a CO, I would walk around and I would tell the Jawans, hey, इस पत्थर के पीछे हो जा, गोली लगेगी. So one day I was pushing a guy behind the stone, and he suddenly looked up and said, "आप तो खड़े हो." And suddenly it struck me, true, I'm standing. It's not that I'm a brave guy. It is just that when you're taking care of others and when you're sort of bringing calmness to everybody, automatically you start feeling calmer. Same thing happens at home. If there's a slight crisis and the father goes to pieces, sure, the wife and the children are going to go to pieces. But if the father says, "Don't worry, ये थोड़ी समस्या चल रही है, 8-10 दिन ये ठीक हो जाएगा." All right. So you got to pretend. Do you think our Prime Minister is not worried about how the economy is or in what crisis we are going through? But when he comes to face you, or when he faces the troops, how does he behave? So there is the secret that you really need to. I know it sounds very simplistic, but you just have to act it out and it'll be all right. No, but fill your mind with optimistic thoughts because things do. Or look back at your past and ask yourself, how many of my fears really came true? From the day when I was a child and I worried, why are my friends not taking me with them to play? Why is this not happening? Why is he not liking me? Why is she not liking me? I'm not going to get a job. I'm not going to pass. How many of those fears came true? Therein lies the answer. That's what we do.
Thank you, sir.
Principal Polytechnic has asked me a question. Professor Gautam, I presume. He says,
Yes.
Sometimes inspiring leaders are disturbed by the incompetence of the next superior leaders. How do I deal with the situation? Good question. This is a whole new topic. You know, when I conduct this faculty development program, I didn't cover this topic, but somebody suggested to me later on that we should have a view from below. Now, it has a long answer, but the short answer is there is pretty much very little you can do other than staying centered and staying balanced and not responding and reacting to everything that happens in your life. Every battle is not worth fighting. Pick your battles. Some things look too big. अरे इतना incompetent आदमी है, मेरे को ये करना है, ऐसे थोड़ा होता है. Half the time we should simply follow because we have not stepped into those shoes. If somebody working in polytechnic feels that, I'm not talking about your polytechnic, that the principal, unko kya pata hai, he's wrong because he's not been a principal ever. He doesn't know what the pains of principal are. He doesn't know who he has to deal with. He doesn't know what his equation with the management is. So 50 to 60 to 70% of the time, you should obey. Because if he allowed disobedience or questioning everything, nothing can run. All right. But having said that, the problem is deeper than that. Sometimes you are with a very nasty person. Sometimes the problem is bigger. A, keep developing your competence. B, keep upskilling so that you always have an option at some later date. Nobody can just walk out of the job. I never recommend anyone walking out of a job. But to develop an option for future, start creating an option. But on a simpler note, stay balanced, stay centered. Let me give you a little story. You see, half the time it is our ego which troubles us. मेरे को ऐसा क्यों बोला, मुझे बुलाया, मेरे को ऐसा बोल दिया, मेरे को बैठने के लिए नहीं बोला, उसको बैठने के लिए बोला. We do all sorts of, you know how it is. We are human beings. Most of the trouble is being caused by this. So there were two Buddhist monks, priests. They were going for a walk. It's a story. Let's call them senior monk and junior monk. Now, apparently the rule was, or religion said, that they cannot touch a woman. In the jungle, they came to a daldal. A beautiful lady was standing there, wearing a beautiful dress. So the senior monk asked her, "Why aren't you crossing this?" She said, "I can't cross this daldal. My entire dress will become bad." So he said, "No problem, I'll carry you." He scooped up her in his arms, and he walked across the daldal. The junior monk was horrified. He said, "This incompetent senior monk, he doesn't know. Our religion has prohibited us to touch a woman. He's carrying her in his arms." After the daldal was crossed, he put the lady down and they kept walking for the next 5-6 kilometers. They were still talking, but this was playing on the mind of the junior monk. Finally, he stopped him. He said, "Senior monk, please tell me one thing. Don't you know our religion prohibits us from touching a woman? Why did you pick her up in your arms? In your arms?" You know what the senior monk said? He said, "I put down that woman 10 kilometers ago. You are still carrying her." That is what ego does. Most things don't matter. I once read a beautiful thing in Reader's Digest. It said, "It doesn't matter. Make this your mantra. You'll feel hurt so many times. It doesn't matter. In the larger scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Life never ends till it ends." Okay? But like I said, it's a big subject, long subject, and we can talk about it some other day, some other forum. All right. Anything else? Thanks to everyone who's written good comments and thanked me. I'm thanking you for this opportunity. Thanks to all of you.
General Bali, sir. Thank you so much for all the inputs. I'm very eager to understand the feedback of all the faculty. For the first time, I see so many of the participants, collectively taking part and getting involved in a webinar like this. Like you said, the mode of training, teaching is changing, is fast changing, thanks to COVID. Things that we had imagined is actually, it's transpiring into reality. Sir, we really would want to establish a connect with you in the days to come as an institution. And, thank you very much for all your inputs. I'm definitely going to share our collective feedback as an email to you. And at this point in time, I would request our dear principal, who is sitting here right next to me, fully involved in this webinar and also giving his input, sharing his experiences, in the, every given time. I would request Dr. Chaitanya Kumar, a gentleman who has led from the front, for almost the last 3 to 4 decades as principals of various institutions, and has now, come into a leadership role with this PES Institute of Technology and Management for the last 2 years. I would request our dear principal, sir, to convey his thanks and also express his thoughts.
Good afternoon, Colonel sir. Good afternoon. It was a very pleasant experience going through the narration that you took us along. Many times, as Pramod was saying, we were actually be there in your visualization that was being explained. So I would thank you for being with us and extend our full warm greetings to you. And all participants who have participated, they will have been benefited. And if they can implement some of the suggestions that you have done, especially the one answer you give to Professor Gautam regarding the subordinate thinking is superior, is incompetent. Many times that happens because when I call somebody and give him a job, that fellow will be staring at me, is asking why he's asking me to do this job. Does he think I'm so low level that I am supposed to do this job? But he doesn't understand the pangs of my problem, how to get it done, and so on and so forth. So that was a very good explanation given to Professor Gautam. And we would like to have many more sessions at different domains. And at any point of time, anything that is required from your side, from our institute, we will be very glad to extend to you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much once again from all of us at PCTM. Thank you, sir.
I'm really delighted. I must tell you that this is reminding me of my interaction at PS College, Aurangabad. Like I said, I'd done a full faculty development. I still see some people sitting here listening to this. So I have almost developed a little familial kind of relationship with that college. Listening to you and Mr. Pramod, I am getting the same feeling again.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure to do anything for you and vice versa, whatever, anytime. Thank you very much. Kind of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Once again, thank you.
Also, Snehal and Mangesh, Thank you so much for facilitating this seminar. We would really want to know more about Scout Group and how best you can deliver value to us in the time to come. Thank you,
Definitely.
everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.